So how is Capitol Hill responding to the tragedy? I'm joined by Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger of Illinois and Democratic Congressman Jim Moran of Virginia. On Saturday, Russia barred Congressman Moran and 12 other members of his delegation from entering the country. So your summer vacation plans have taken a turn, I guess, for not being able to go there. But Congressman Moran, I'll sort of start out with you. You were barred, sort of your thoughts upon that, and can the United States really have a working relationship with Vladimir Putin when these types of steps have been taken by him against lawmakers such as you?
Well, certainly how he relates to individual lawmakers doesn't matter. I do think that we have bipartisan position here in opposition to what has happened and to the low-key response that Europe has shown. I think that the U.S. Congress wants a much stronger response. Now, the reason I was barred is undoubtedly because we had an amendment that passed with overwhelming bipartisan support to prevent the U.S. military from buying Russian helicopters from this Rosoboron export, which is a Russian-owned, controlled arms dealer, and they're supplying most of the arms to Assad's regime in Syria. So why are we subsidizing them for the war in Afghanistan? So that passed overwhelmingly. The Russians weren't happy about that. But I think the problem is Europe. You know, where is Europe on this? They look to us. We had one American. These were over 100 Europeans. I was over in London a few months ago talking with some financial people, and they said, you know, we're not going to be able to comply with these sanctions. I said, why? They said, well, these Russian oligarchs have put so much money into the London real estate market, the market would implode if they had to pull their money out.
So I'll go to you, Representative Kinzinger. What can the U.S. then do? I mean, if the European economic interests seem directly tied now to Russia, they don't seem to want to be jumping off the plank here at all or walk the plank at all. What can we do in terms of tougher sanctions?
I think it takes a leadership role. We can't unilaterally basically disarm with regards to Russia. I think sanctions in terms of our ability to extract energy, which we're very good at, not exporting that to the Russians. But I think, you know, making the point with the Europeans, look, if you think it's bad now, if you think you can't act now, wait till your economy's even more tied in with the Russians. And then they're going to start running roughshod over all of Europe, and you're going to claim, you know, we can't do anything. This is why you have political leadership and not just CEOs running a government, because political leadership can take the economic interest and the political interest and find that balancing act. One big issue, the French are selling the Mistral warship to the Russians. This is the thing that the defense minister of Russia said, that in the Georgian war, they could have won that war in 45 minutes if they'd have had these ships, because it would allow them to control the Black Sea. The French are continuing to sell this to the Russians right now. The French ought to take a political leadership, take a leadership role and say, we're going to, the hundreds of Russian soldiers in our country right now being trained on this, they're going home, and the Russians are not getting. It's an economic impact, but it's the right thing to do, and it'll send a strong message.
One thing I found fascinating in terms of this crash site that was certainly sort of left the way it was under the control of Russian rebels for a period of days. Why was there not an impetus, you guys think, for the president to sort of take a leadership role with our NATO allies and say, at the very least, we should get control of the crash site? Does that seem like something that could start World War III? Is there, what do you think was the reason why the crash site was left the way it was out there? Just sort of this fear of engaging too far into the Ukrainian civil war?
Well, but Luke, how are we going to do that? Are we going to put boots on the ground? No, the Dutch certainly aren't going to. Now, I do think that the European Union should have had a stronger response. But, you know, these separatists control it. They've got this guy, Igor Strelkov, who's was a colonel in the Russian secret police. He thinks this is the People's Republic of Donetsk. And
so that sort of illustrates how much our hands are tied here.
Well, I think that's the big issue, is the Ukraine thing has gone from just being a civil war now. Because of this shoot down and some other things, this has now gone to a regional issue, something that's much bigger. So I think it's important now for Europe, and especially the United States, which has the capability to do it, to begin in very earnest arming the Ukrainian military to ensure that they have all the intelligence that we have to help them with tactics, and get very serious about pushing this pro-Russian, these militias out of Ukraine. They're being trained and funded, and in some cases they have embeds from the Russian military. It's time to end this. This has gone beyond Ukraine, and this is now a much bigger issue.
Can that pass through Congress, a uptick in funding for the Ukrainian military and intelligence operation?
I do think that could pass through Congress on a bipartisan basis. I don't think there's much question about that. This whole thing, I don't know where it's going, but it's so ironic and so outrageous. I mean, Russia sells its natural resources to Europe. Europe sends the money to the Russian oligarchs. They then invest it in Europe, and then Europe feels that it against Russia. And here it's a communist regime. Putin himself, they say, is worth $60 billion.
Yeah, richest man in the world.
There's going to have to be the Western powers are going to have to get together and take stronger action.
So let's finish up with you. Do you think this Congress, before possibly the recess or over the next month or so, even be called back, do you think there could be some sort of uptick in funding for Ukrainian military?
Yeah, sure, if it's needed. I mean, when we passed the Ukrainian support bills and everything is passing way overwhelmingly out of Congress. We have our debates and we have our partisanship, but I think, and I'm an old school believer, that when we go outside the coast of the United States, Americans stand together, Republican, Democrat, left and right, and I think there is very strong support for this. And if it's needed, if the president decides to move forward on arming Ukraine and everything else, you'll have a supportive Congress.
So that'd be interesting. Congress getting involved in the proxy war in Ukraine against the Russians. Everything old is new again. Adam Kinzinger, Jim Moran, thank you so much for being on the show. We appreciate it. Up next,